In Demon Souls, there are two types of magic. There are sorceries, which are cast by sorcerers with their knowledge of the soul arts, and there are miracles, which are cast by clerics through their faith to God. These two forms of magic didn't always exist. Long ago, an ancient being called the Old One was awoken by a man who thirsted for power. With its awakening came the advent of magic. The Church saw all soul magics that came from this event as evil and as the result of demons and their souls. On the other hand, though, miracles, they claimed, were granted to the Church as a way for the holy to fight the Old One in the name of God. The Church is wrong. The Old One is the source of all magic, both miracles and sorcery, and all along, the symbol of God was nothing more than the image of the Old One. It's the biggest twist in Demon Souls to think that the clerics were no different than the sorcerers they hated so much, that all along their faith was founded on the evil they sought to destroy. One guy called Scurvir probably realized this when he found the Talisman of Beasts, a talisman of the Church which can cast miracles and sorceries, indicating that they both have the same origin. When we reach the end of Demon Souls and put the Old One to slumber, we will essentially be removing magic from the world, for without soul magics and miracles to raise kingdoms, men will be forced to rely on tools, advanced weaponry, and more modern forms of medicine and science. You might see what I'm getting at here, because I think this brings us to Bloodborne, a game with the codename Project Beast, just like the Talisman of Beasts, set in a city where people are turning into beasts. Magic doesn't seem to exist. There's a character with the Maiden in Black's voice, who's a character from Demon Souls, and I can't show you this footage, but the word Umbasa, which is a prayer from Demon Souls, has been uttered by a character in Bloodborne. We could be looking at Demon Souls 2 from a story point of view, and even if that's not true, that's exciting. Regardless of all that though, I didn't call this video Demon Souls 2 just because of the potential story, even though there might be a potential story there. No, I called it that because every time the developer draws comparisons to the Souls series, he specifically mentions Demon Souls, not Dark Souls, which is more recent and more popular. This is a strange thing, but I put it down to, more than anything else, the fact that Bloodborne is a PlayStation exclusive just like Demon Souls was. I quote Miyazaki here by saying, "The format of the game is very close to Demon Souls. It's in the action RPG genre, and it features a behind-the-back camera. But Bloodborne," he says, "has three powerful themes. First one I'm going to talk about is the feeling of fighting for one's life." Now, you could argue that the Souls games have this theme as well. These are games where the fear of death is justified because you actually stand to lose something, unlike in most modern games. But Bloodborne seems to mean fight for your life, much more literally. Essentially, you are actually fighting for your health. When you get hit in Bloodborne, you have a 3-second period where you can recover that lost health by striking out at your opponent. As a result, you need to take a more active approach to combat rather than a passive one. A passive approach to combat is something that's favored in the Souls series. In Bloodborne, get up close and personal with your enemies, dance circles around them, and get revenge as soon as you get hit. You take a risk by doing this, but the better you are, the more calculated that risk will be. The game mechanics, I reckon, are all built around giving more power to the offensive player. You can also press L1 to change weapon modes, extending your axe for longer reach, or splitting your sword in half to wield 2 daggers. This drastically changes the array of melee combos you have available to you. When you have a gun in your left hand, you can shoot enemies when they're mid-attack to stagger them and put them into a repostable state, where you go up to them and rip something from deep within their chest. There is nothing defensive about the mechanics of Bloodborne, and you just won't be playing this the same way as you play the Souls series. For example, something might jump out from behind a corner or in a dark place and attack you and surprise you, but now you have to rely on your reflexes to get you out of this situation, where in Dark Souls you would have just gone around that corner with the shield up. This is a much more sort of thrilling, engaging experience. There was this one part in the alpha in particular where I went into this really old, pitch black house, right? And every step you took made this creaking sound on the old wooden floorboards, and if you stopped moving to listen just for a second, you could hear the barely audible sound of enemies breathing somewhere close. and I didn't know I could pull my torch out with the D-pad at this point, so you carefully tread through, hearing those floorboards creak, until you hear an enemy coming at you and making a noise, or maybe you illuminate him with your torch. But the point I'm getting at is, you rely on your senses and your reflexes to get you through, rather than just progressing with your shield held high. And, when you have more to lose, when you're really engaged in this way and you can't just hold your shield up, it's a really immersive experience. When they said fight for your life, they didn't just mean the health back mechanic, they also meant, in general, you feel more vulnerable, and that is definitely something I felt in Bloodborne. The second theme is exploring the unknown. In the Soul series, who knows what's around the next corner? One second you're in a poisonous wasteland, the next, a volcano? The major difference I can see in Bloodborne and Souls seems to be that Bloodborne is a more consistent world. It's all built around a very central theme, whereas Souls you can go to drastically different environments. Miyazaki says he wants to capture the feeling of remote towns that you would have seen in the Victorian era, stuff that's really old and gloomy and gothic, with dark alleyways and dim lamps, carriages, graveyards, and wet streets glistening with the light of the moon. There's an incredible attention to detail thus far, and that comes from having that sort of centralized theme. This town, Yharnam, is a town long known for its medical advancements. Ironically, it's held in the grip of a bloodborne disease that's turning its inhabitants into beasts, with elongated limbs, claws, and fur. Everyone seems to be in various states of transformation, but the interesting thing is no one seems to know that they've turned into beasts. They don't have that self-awareness. We are the most humanoid and self-aware thing here, apparently, because as I engage enemies, they yell, "Away, foul beast," or "It's all your fault." These enemies are clearly delusional. They're the ones turning into beasts. Why are they saying that? And it makes you feel a sort of pity for them. You have to wonder, what sort of distorted reality are they seeing through their eyes, where you're the beast and they aren't? It's one of those things where the story is really intriguing just because of things you see in the world and things you hear in the world, and that's something I'll touch on later. But in terms of the setting, the only concern I have with Bloodborne thus far is that the settings we experience might be limited to those gloomy streets and the eerie graveyards. I do like a consistent experience. It allows for a much higher attention to detail, but I also do like a bit of variety. That said, we do clearly travel outside the city's limits, as we've seen forested areas, and this is only an alpha, this is only one small part of the city, who knows, different parts of the city could look drastically different, so I am confident that they'll do more than we've seen so far. But I do think it's going to be more consistent, and if that's not for you, well. Anyway, I mentioned before that this attention to detail makes you much more intrigued in the setting. Miyazaki has this intention of us exploring the unknown, and I think it also applies to the mysterious story and setting. This city is so gripped by some plague that it's going to be really hard for us to infiltrate into it and get to the bottom of what's going on. We see really intriguing things that make us want to know more about the world. I was walking through this courtyard, right? And then I look down and there's this sort of wriggling, tentacled shadow on the ground. And so I look behind me to see what's casting that shadow. And on this building, there is this massive, spider-like creature the size of a skyscraper, clinging to a building and looking at me with about 20 or so eyes. As I progress through the level, these eyes actually seem to follow me. And you start thinking, what is that thing? It has a squid's body for a head, the multi-eyed face of a fly, 6 human hands, and this really furry abdomen. Will I get to find out what that is? What created it? What the hell is going on in this city that something like this can come to be? Will I have to kill it at some point? This is what I think Miyazaki wants to convey by his theme of exploring the unknown. The monstrosities you see leave you with a lot of questions, and it's really intriguing so far in a way that I feel like the Soul series is kind of forgetting. The third powerful theme Miyazaki talks about in Bloodborne is new online elements, but so far from what we've seen, there really isn't that much different from Souls, so he must be hiding something up his sleeve. We've got a taste of some of the online in the alpha. You open your online menu and you get 4 options. You can ring the luring bell, which will attempt to summon another player into your world. The small resonant bell will summon you into another player's world. Parting Shot allows you to leave another person's world, or it can also force someone out of your world, and the Notebook also allows you to leave messages for other players, just like the Soapstone would. There are rumors though, and this is talking about the stuff that Miyazaki hasn't officially mentioned, that players might actually turn into beasts if they succumb to the sickness, meaning you might have to kill other people as beasts, or you might be summoned into other players' worlds to take out the other players who have become beasts. Take all this with a grain of salt, but if that's in the PvP, that's going to be pretty damn incredible. We could essentially become the beasts that we're hunting. All in all though, multiplayer seems pretty standard so far and similar to Souls, apart from the beast thing. So these are the 3 most potent themes, and while they actually promise to be more prominent in Bloodborne than they are in the Souls series, these 3 aren't the only similarities the 2 games share. Let's do a quick fire round talking about all the other stuff that is different and the same. Healing is done with blood vials, the use of which has a designated button in the triangle button, and also healing is always shown now in the top left. In the alpha, these blood vials dropped randomly from enemies, and they were pretty plentiful, but we are unclear on how common they will be in the full game, or if there's any other way to get them. We haven't seen anything symbolizing a checkpoint yet, but we have seen the incredibly complex levels that are very reminiscent of Demon Souls and Dark Souls, in the sense that you can unlock shortcuts that will take you to drastically different areas of the game. This is something you wouldn't have seen in Dark Souls 2, which was a much more linear experience. These interconnected areas make me think that we could be looking at an entire city that is open world without any real checkpoint. Or at least, there might be smaller segments of the city up for exploration, similar to how Demon Souls had little levels that you could do. Let me know what you think of that. The one boss we've seen so far is the Cleric Beast, which was a really incredibly aggressive enemy that could be taken out when you figured out how to deliver critical attacks. The fight was really good, it was really hard, and once you figured out how to do those critical attacks, the fight dynamic changes completely. The only problem I have with it was that you couldn't exactly predict its attacks very well, and also the camera got in the way a lot, because you know when you fight an enemy that's really tall, like the last giant, camera's just always going to be a problem. And the camera was a bit of a problem with the Cleric Beast, because you couldn't actually see where he was attacking you or when he was winding up for an attack. But it was a really good experience overall. These critical attacks were initiated by shooting his head, which makes use of a lot of the extra mobility you have as a character, and you have to really dash in there real quick and do your attack on his head, and it's a very sort of risk-reward boss battle. The boss battles are actually initiated a different way this time around. You will find the boss, you'll engage them in the area, and then you'll look behind you and you'll see, oh crap, there's a fog gate there, I can't escape. Now this is different from the Souls games. In the Souls games, you'll always go through a fog gate to initiate a fight, but in Bloodborne it looks like you will initiate the fight and then realize you're within a fog gate. This changes after the first time you've engaged that boss. After the first time you've engaged them, you will see those fog gates there all the time. In terms of difficulty, like I mentioned before with the Cleric Beast, it's really hard. The game is really difficult. But the thing is, From has never particularly said that they want to make Bloodborne a difficult game. In fact, I think a few times they've said the opposite. But the thing is with From Software, they always say this. They never really say, oh, we're gonna make the game really difficult, that's what it's known for. That's not what they usually say. They usually say that they want to put gameplay first and that the game is inherently difficult as a result, because that's the way they design their games. This means that gameplay usually comes before difficulty, which is the way it's supposed to be done. If you've played the Souls games, you're going to be very familiar with the controls, because they're more or less the same. Triangle is your dedicated healing button now, L1 switches the mode of your right-handed weapon, L2 allows you to fire your gun or perhaps get a unique attack when you're dual-wielding or two-handing a weapon instead of holding a gun, and R2 can actually be used as a charge-up attack, which you use on enemies when they're not facing you to initiate a backstab. This makes it much more difficult to backstab enemies compared to the Souls games. Rolling is still your circle button, though you only roll when you're unlocked, and you can roll in any direction, and you dash when you're locked on. The dash seems a bit faster, but you can only dash left, right, forward, and back. And most importantly, in terms of the differences from Souls games, Ragdoll physics, they're back. So I covered all these things pretty quickly because I think most of you would have heard it before, but there are going to be some of you watching this video who want to know more about the gameplay and want to know more in depth. There are two great videos you can watch that aren't by me. There's one that's really short and really concise by Dave Control Live, so he's got you covered if you want to watch a 15-minute video on everything we know about Bloodborne, but if you want to get a feel for the game and watch something much more long form, then Peeve Peverson will keep you entertained for a good hour and a half. I really recommend that video if you just want to watch the entire alpha being played through by someone who's actually really good at the game. And I just wanted to put something out there that was a little bit shorter and a little bit more about the parallels we can draw to the Soul series. If you have any questions at all on this game, then how about you leave a comment on this video, and I might just pull some questions from this comment section to do another Q&A video. I don't know if many of you remember my last Q&A video. You guys left me a little bit scarred from that one, but I am keen to do another one, so if you have any questions, leave them down below, and if I can't answer you, maybe someone else will be able to. But other than that, guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.